10 radiators on this car, 2 at the front, 2 on the side, 2 on the side there. There's like another 2 on the side there. There's like another 2 on the side there. There's a hell of a lot of radiators.
The Bugatti Chiron carries 10 radiators, not 1 or 2 like a conventional performance car, but 10 separate heat exchangers working in coordination to keep a 1,500 horsepower quad turbocharged W16 engine within survivable thermal limits. 2 sit at the front, managing primary engine coolant. 2 more are positioned along each side, channeling heat away from critical systems. Additional units handle the charge. Cooling requirements of compressed air rushing through turbochargers, and the rest support transmission, overflow, and supplementary thermal circuits that most cars never even need to consider. It is an ecosystem, not a component, and every part of that ecosystem is essential. Remove one, and the balance begins to collapse. Damage several, as happened in the crash that effectively wrote this particular car off, and the entire system becomes non-functional. That is where the real story begins, not with the spectacle of the car itself, but with the absence that followed. Because when those radiators were destroyed, the expected next step in any traditional ownership scenario would have been straightforward. Contact the manufacturer, order replacements, wait, pay, and restore. Except that option never existed here. Bugatti did not supply the parts. There was no accessible channel, no alternative distribution, no workaround within the official ecosystem. The supply chain, for all practical purposes, simply ended. And what remained was a car that could not function and a problem that, according to the structure built around it, was not supposed to be solved independently. That is the tension that quietly defines this entire rebuild. Not the damage itself, but the boundary it exposed. Because what happens when a system designed to be closed encounters someone unwilling to accept that closure? What happens when the absence of permission becomes the starting point rather than the stopping point? That is where Bob enters the story, and the presence of Bob immediately shifts the narrative away from limitation and toward possibility. Not in a theoretical sense, but in a way that unfolds step by step, decision by decision, inside a machine shop that has none of the branding, none of the authority, and none of the institutional backing that supposedly defines where a car like this can be repaired. Bob is not a factory technician. He does not operate within Bugatti's network, does not follow their procedural documentation, and does not have access to their internal specifications. What he has instead is something far less formal and, in this context, far more powerful: experience, intuition, and a practical understanding of engineering that is rooted not in instruction manuals, but in years of solving problems where no manual existed to begin with. Matt Armstrong describes him in simple terms, but those terms carry weight. Someone who asks what a problem actually needs rather than what a procedure says should be done. That distinction might sound subtle, but it defines everything that follows. Because rebuilding a radiator system for a car like the Chiron is not a matter of copying shapes or approximating dimensions. It is a matter of understanding the physics behind what those shapes and dimensions are meant to achieve. A radiator is often misunderstood as a simple component, something that moves coolant through tubes while air passes over fins to remove heat. But in reality, it is a highly tuned balance of variables where every measurement carries consequence. Tube pitch determines how fluid flows and how pressure behaves within the system. Fin density dictates how effectively heat can be transferred while maintaining sufficient airflow. Tank volume must align with the broader cooling circuit, and connection points must match the architecture of the car precisely, not approximately, because even minor deviations can cascade into larger failures once the system is under load. Bugatti's engineers designed these radiators with access to extensive data, testing facilities, and proprietary knowledge. None of that information is publicly available. None of it was provided to Matt or Bob. And yet, the absence of official data did not mean the absence of information entirely. Because what Bob understood, and what many overlook, is that even a damaged component still contains its own blueprint. A destroyed radiator is not useless if you know how to read it. Bent fins still reveal density. Crushed cores still reveal tube spacing. Surviving sections still indicate material thickness, geometry, and intent. The original parts, even in failure, carry the imprint of their design. So instead of seeing them as unusable, Bob approached them as a source of data, extracting measurements, observing patterns, and reconstructing the underlying specification piece by piece. This is where the process begins to take on a different character, moving away from repair and into something closer to reverse engineering. Step by step, Bob translates physical remnants into functional requirements. Tube pitch is measured from intact sections. Fin density is counted where structure remains visible. Tank dimensions are inferred from surviving edges. Hose connection points are mapped from what is left of the original fittings. Each observation builds a partial picture, and as those partial pictures accumulate, they begin to form a complete specification, not in the formal sense of a documented blueprint, but in the practical sense of understanding what the replacement must achieve in order to work. Once that understanding is established, the next challenge emerges, and it is not trivial. Finding a core that matches those requirements without access to Bugatti's supply chain. This is where the story takes a turn that, on the surface, seems almost absurd, but becomes entirely logical when viewed through the lens of engineering rather than branding. The cores that match the required dimensions, tube spacing, and fin density were not sourced from another hypercar manufacturer, not from a specialized exotic parts supplier, but from a Honda Civic. At first, that contrast feels jarring. A component associated with one of the most accessible cars in the world being used to rebuild one of the most exclusive. But the reality is far less dramatic and far more grounded in physics. Heat transfer does not recognize brand hierarchy. A radiator core that meets the necessary specifications will perform its function regardless of the badge attached to the vehicle it originated from. The Civic core was not chosen because it was cheap or convenient in a superficial sense, but because it matched the engineering requirements derived from the original Chiron radiators. That is the key distinction. This was not improvisation for the sake of improvisation. It was selection based on compatibility at a fundamental level. With the cores sourced, the project transitions fully into fabrication, and this is where the machine shop becomes the center of the story. Because the cores alone are not sufficient, they are only one part of a larger assembly that must integrate seamlessly into the Chiron's existing cooling system. Hose connections must be machined to precise diameters and angles to ensure proper flow and fitment. Mounting brackets must be fabricated to align with the car's chassis points, maintaining correct positioning relative to surrounding components. Fan mounts must be incorporated to allow the existing cooling fans to attach and function as intended. Each of these elements requires not just measurement, but judgment. Decisions about material, thickness, placement, and tolerances must be made without the safety net of official guidance. And those decisions must be correct, because there is no margin for trial and error at scale when dealing with a system this integrated. As the components come together, the process begins to resemble something closer to manufacturing than repair. Cores are combined with custom-machined fittings. Brackets are shaped and attached. Assemblies are aligned and checked against the dimensions derived earlier. This is where most attempts at a project like this would begin to fail, not because the concept is flawed, but because execution at this level requires consistency across multiple variables simultaneously. A bracket slightly misaligned can prevent proper mounting. A connection angled incorrectly can strain hoses or restrict flow. Small errors compound quickly. And yet, aside from a single moment late in the process where fatigue led to a bracket being positioned on the wrong side, an issue that was quickly identified and corrected, the assemblies come together with a level of accuracy that allows them to move forward to the next stage: installation. When the radiators are fitted to the car, the transition from theory to reality becomes visible. The central unit slides into place between the chassis rails. Mounting points align. Bolts secure without resistance. Hoses connect where they are meant to. The side radiators follow, each finding its position within a structure that was never designed to accept anything other than factory components. And yet, they fit. Not approximately, not temporarily, but correctly. This is the moment where the abstract becomes tangible, where the idea of independent reconstruction proves itself in physical form. But installation alone is not validation. That comes with testing. The cooling system is pressurized, and the outcome hinges on a simple binary result. Either it holds, or it does not. Pressure builds within the system, moving through every connection, every weld, every interface between original and fabricated components. For a moment, there is silence, and silence in this context is success. It means the system is sealed, that the work holds under static conditions. Then a sound emerges, subtle but undeniable, a leak. Not catastrophic, not indicative of systemic failure, but present. Investigation reveals it to be localized, likely the result of minor damage sustained during transport rather than a flaw in fabrication. The reaction to this moment is revealing, not because of the issue itself, but because of how it is handled. There is no hesitation, no reconsideration of the entire approach. The response is immediate and focused. Identify, repair, move forward. The leak is something to be welded, not something to invalidate the process. And that mindset, more than any individual step, defines the success of what has been accomplished. Because what Bob achieved in 3 days is not simply the creation of functional radiators. It is the demonstration that a system designed to be closed can be understood, replicated, and restored through independent effort. When placed in context, the contrast becomes even more striking. The official route, had it been available, would likely have involved extended lead times, controlled pricing, and complete reliance on a manufacturer that had already chosen not to participate. Instead, the solution emerged from a workshop built from accessible components, guided by practical knowledge, and completed in a time frame that challenges assumptions about what is possible. This is not a story about cutting corners or undermining engineering. It is a story about engaging with engineering directly, without intermediaries, and arriving at a result that functions within the same constraints the original designers had to consider. The radiators now sitting inside that Chiron are not placeholders. They are working components, integrated into a system that demands precision and reliability. And while the broader implications of that may continue to unfold, the immediate reality is already clear. A problem that was not supposed to have an independent solution has been solved. Not through access, not through permission, but through capability. And that, more than anything else, is what gives this moment its weight.